What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and in today's video, we're going to look toward what could be coming to Universal Studios, and in this video in particular, about some things that could be coming to Islands of Adventure, as we have a video from Attraction Ideas that we're going to react to where he's talking about Toon Lagoon, and perhaps this is an area of Islands of Adventure that could be changed here very soon, but he also lays out some reasons as to why it could be staying where it is and really why it stayed for so long, which I do find very interesting. But I've always felt that Toon Lagoon is a prime place in all of Universal Studios that could have something else going here that would be a big draw for this area. And I always enjoy Attraction Ideas, well, his ideas about what you could do in theme parks. So I figured this is a good one to react to, as obviously we have Rip Ride Rocket to make way for another attraction in Universal Studios. And this one caught my eye. So we're going to watch through this and react to it here. So
Toon Lagoon, without a doubt, the theme park land that has generated the most amount of revenue, not for Universal, but for Google search engine, as every single day, hundreds of people go to the app to look up who the heck the characters in this land are.
I even had this same thing when I went as a kid, the first time I went. These cartoons are well before even my time. Not that I'm insanely old, but hey, some of these cartoons I was aware of because of reruns. I remember seeing it like my grandma's house when I was a kid, but a lot of these things, I can imagine kids today, like our kids have no clue who any of these characters are. And this has been the case probably for 20 plus years.
Simply put, it's a theme park land that has been irrelevant ever since Islands of Adventure first opened its doors. By definition, it is a theme park land that has overstayed its welcome by all 26 years of its existence. And now that
That's kind of wild, but it's true. Like, it wasn't even relevant when it opened. That's kind of crazy.
Universal is wrapping construction on Epic Universe, perhaps now Universal can turn their attention back to Islands of Adventure and Universal Studios Florida, and perhaps finally tackle the stain on this park that is Toon Lagoon, and finally wipe it off the map for good. After all, this is a land that is primarily comprised of comic strip characters from, newspapers. Remember when people used to read those? And television cartoon characters from not anytime recently, no, but from the 60s. Popeye, who not only has sort of a mini land within Toon Lagoon, but also has one of the major rides themed to him in Popeye and Bluto's Bilge Rat Barges, was originally a comic strip character who then got turned into animated short films and then was eventually brought into an animated television series in the 1960s. Since then,
I mean, it's kind of like Mickey Mouse, but not as popular. Like I said, I remember seeing Popeye reruns when I would go to my grandma's house, because I don't remember what was on TV, but it was, I don't know what channel or anything, but it was a lot of times Popeye was on. I never liked it as a kid. It was just a thing that was on at my grandma's house. It always felt they were very strange cartoons that was just trying to get kids to eat spinach, which never worked because spinach is gross. But, it's never been a relevant thing, I don't think, since Islands of Adventure has been open. I completely agree with that.
The only piece of substantial media that's been put out for the property was in 1980 with the live-action Popeye film.
Funny thing about that movie, I don't know if anybody have seen, I don't know if it was recently, but it was talked about, I think the director of that, of apparently there was so much certain white powdered substances on the set of that movie. They said they were like literally in film canisters there. I don't know if I've ever seen this movie. I don't recall seeing it. But knowing that information about it, I feel like this one could be one of those movies where you're like, oh, that makes sense why everybody was hopped up on things during this movie, as I find that little tidbit interesting. But yeah, I actually forgot that this was a live action movie that actually happened and Robin Williams was Popeye. Modern movies are not nearly as good as they were in the 90s, though I don't think Popeye was heralded as a cinematic classic, I guess you could say. But maybe it's a film of its time in terms of how things happened on sets versus now. But even the idea that Popeye was ever popular enough to be made into a live action, I do find kind of funny. But I may have to watch this movie because I feel like it may be a wild one, and I don't recall even seeing trailers for this, but I don't know. I might watch it. I don't know.
Live action Popeye film. Ever since then, it's been an absolute ghost town for Popeye. Now, that being said, believe it or not, despite that, He is actually the most relevant character in this land even to this day. And if that's the case, a character who hasn't had anything meaningful produced as far as new media goes in almost 45 years? Yeah, I'm thinking that the rest of the characters in this land are basically ancient relics at this point. They're basically hieroglyphics to the guests who visit Universal today. They have no idea what they're looking at. They have no idea who these characters are, and they have no idea where they even came from. Case in point, Dudley Do-Right, who is of course the main character of the second major ride in this land, that being Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls. This character didn't even have his own show and was just a sideshow for the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, which also, like Popeye, ran in the 1960s.
Now, for whatever reason, I am more familiar with Rocky and Bullwinkle. I don't know why. It's just one of these things where I remember I see it. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember watching those. But it's kind of funny. I don't think there's even really much of Rocky and Bullwinkle in this land either, which I think would make more sense to have him with Popeye. But even those, like, I'm just vaguely familiar, but it does sound more familiar in my head. But I couldn't tell you of a specific cartoon I ever saw of it, even as a kid.
And for some reason, they thought that this character was the perfect fit for the major e-ticket attraction of this land. Like, what were you thinking? I mean, in all fairness to Universal, Dudley Do-Right did have a live action film with Brendan Fraser that came out the same year that Islands of Adventure opened. So perhaps they were banking on that film, making Dudley Do-Right relevant with modern audiences. But let me tell you what, that plan fell flat on its face big time. That plan went out the window and it got flushed down the proverbial drain. Nobody knows that movie. Nobody saw that movie. Nobody really cared for that movie, quite frankly, by and large. And as a result, the character is not only not relevant today, but now pretty much is about as irrelevant as you could possibly get as far as theme park IP goes.
I do wonder in a given day if you walked around Islands of Adventure and just surveyed people asking them if they knew any of these cartoon characters in Toon Lagoon, I would be very curious to know the percentage of people and break that down by age of who are even aware of these characters are. I think it would be very, very low, especially if you get like 40 and under. I think that's when people would be like, I maybe have heard of it or just saw it for the first time today.
And this has all been without saying and pointing to arguably the land's biggest flaw, which is the fact that about a quarter of it isn't even used anymore. There is a theater in this land, the Toon Lagoon Theater, that has not been touched and used in a meaningful fashion in over a decade. It is sitting there doing nothing but collecting dust and further adding as a black mark to this land that already has a lot of flaws flying around the room. So there you have it, folks. Case closed, right? After all, Toon Lagoon takes up a disgusting amount of land in this park. It takes up over 12.6 acres, making it the third largest land in Islands of Adventure.
That is wild to think about. But the third biggest land, and it is literally full of properties that nobody's aware of. Which is kind of crazy in that Universal Studios has been the last decade eating into market share from Disney, growing a lot as a theme park destination, and there are still lots of places on property in which you have things like this that are really outdated. And I think they will go through these areas, update them to newer IPs and things like that. It's only going to help Universal, but it is kind of crazy to think how much they've grown with some of these things still relevant or still around in their parks. And 12.6 acres is a lot for this land here.
This is prime real estate for theme park replacement, for theme park expansion. Is the perfect place to put a new land in place that can actually generate revenue for Universal. Let's be honest, these irrelevant characters, they're not selling theme park tickets, they're not selling merchandise, and they're quite frankly doing very little to contribute to Universal's bottom line. And let's be honest, folks, if Toon Lagoon was in a Disney World park, this land would have been gone yesterday. Disney operates completely off the back on how profitable a land is. They have now for a number of years. And the fact that this land doesn't generate really any direct revenue, it would have been gone and thrown out the window ages ago. No question about it. So if you're Universal, this is about as easy of a decision as it ever gets. I mean, this is being offered to you on a silver platter. Nothing of note will be lost, and you'll be able to replace it with a land that can actually generate you direct revenue. It's your golden ticket to a better and brighter future for Islands of Adventure.
There's a but coming, though. considering that this video is 20 minutes long and we're 5 minutes in. I feel like there's a pretty big but coming in here.
But it's really not that simple, is it, folks? I mean, after all, if we're saying that Toon Lagoon was irrelevant from the day it was built, why was it not removed sooner? Why are we now 26 years down the line and this land is still standing put? Why did it have to wait until after Epic Universe was done? I mean, certainly Universal had gone ahead and bulldozed beloved attractions, major lands, and other rides and attractions throughout the parks over the years while Toon Lagoon stood standing.
That also is kind of wild to think about. They took out Back to the Future, King Kong, Jaws, like these, nostalgic rides people hold in like high regard. Those all went before Toon Lagoon. That's kind of crazy to think about.
And they could have instead taken out this 12.6 acres to put something meaningful there, and they didn't. Why have they allowed this land to stay as long as they have if now all of a sudden is the time to replace it? And though it's true that from a monetary perspective, nobody is showing up to Islands of Adventure simply for Toon Lagoon, and nobody's really walking out of the park with Toon Lagoon merchandise for Popeye or Dudley Do-Right, if they even sell that. A very small percentage of people are actually doing that. So from
I kind of wish they had Popeye and I can't remember, Pluto, I think is who it is, arm wrestling. I think that, hey, I would go check that out. That sounds like a good time to go see some arm wrestling with some characters. I like that.
Revenue perspective, this land is not doing anything for you. However, clearly, if this land has been able to stand the test of time for 26 years, it must be providing some sort of value to actually warrant its existence up to this point. And that presumed value that Toon Lagoon is bringing to the table lies entirely in the two rides that inhabit the land. Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls and Popeye and Bluto's Bilge Rat barges contribute to the greatest water ride collection in the world. Islands of Adventure is the best park in the world to go to for water rides. I don't think that there's even a debate for that. Between Popeye and Bluto's, between Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls, between Jurassic Park River Adventure, and even throw in there for fun, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, there is no theme park in the world that even comes close to touching the quality and quantity of water rides that this park has.
I never thought about that, but that's kind of true. Although I think the popularity of water rides, I'm not going to say it's dwindled. I know for at least for me, I'm not always looking to get wet, like on a ride and like drenched. And I think a lot of people fall into that. And I think maybe like modern crowds more or less want more immersive experiences and not just something to get wet on. But it's a decent point about it may be the best water ride collection in a major park.
And the backbone of that distinction comes solely from the two rides in Toon Lagoon. Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls, ever since the closure of Splash Mountain here in the United States, could easily enough be considered to be one of the best, if not straight up the best log flume in the world. And make no mistake about it, Popeye certainly earns just as much of merit as that attraction does as well. It's easily enough one of the best river rapids rides out there as well. Not to mention that, of course, this ride, without a doubt, holds the title for the ride that you will get the most wet on out of any ride anywhere. It's absurd how wet you can get on this thing when all effects are running in the middle of the summer. I mean, you are going to be walking off this thing absolutely drenched.
He's not kidding. We rode this a couple years ago. I don't believe there was an inch of dryness on any clothing I had. You get absolutely soaked on this thing, which again, I don't like. I don't want to go just get completely wet when I'm in a theme park. We did know that going in. We had like swim, we basically had the kids have their swim stuff on, and we kind of had like swimwear on so we could dry quicker, but you get absolutely drenched on this. And at least for me, it's not something that like I want to do all the time. I mean, again, I haven't done this for years now, and I didn't do it for years before. And I'm not a big fan of these river, rough river adventure type of rides. We've seen a decrease in them over the years in theme parks, but this one has been around for quite a while.
Some might say that's a negative, but when you're a water ride, that is a medal of honor. And maybe you think this is just a subjective opinion from myself, but the fact of the matter is, folks, that the stats don't lie, the numbers don't lie. The wait times for these attractions can get absolutely astronomical over the summer when the heat in Florida is at an all-time high. I know, shocking to think that high-quality water rides could be popular when it's hot outside. Popeye, which has absurd capacity, by the way, can garner up to a 45-minute long wait over the summer. And Dudley Do-Right makes that look like absolute peanuts because it can get all the way up to 70 minutes on hot days over the summer, meaning that these rides are among the most popular in the park over the summer months. And though a ride like Jurassic Park River Adventure sees the same sort of seasonality, even that doesn't reach the heights of wait time that these attractions face during the summer, simply because those rides get you more wet and are deemed to be higher quality rides, which is not too surprising given the fact that River Adventure has literally been falling apart for the better part of a decade now.
He's not wrong there. They just now recently fixed some issues they had in one of the hurricanes that came through that damaged that building. But that ride has not aged great. There's a lot of elements of it that don't really work that well anymore.
The properties that these rides are based on have basically been gone with the wind for decades now, and also don't strike a chord whatsoever with modern audiences. People are still turning out in droves to ride these attractions, not because of the characters attached, but because they're just dang good rides. And they're also good rides that actually serve a practical purpose of cooling guests off during those hot summer days.
I would argue it's more about just cooling you off on hot summer days. I'm not really about the quality. I mean, they're fine for what they are. I think most people are riding these just because if you've ever been to a theme park in Central Florida in the middle of the summer, it's hot. Florida's hot most of the time throughout the year, and so it makes sense. If you have a water ride, people are going to get on it for that reason.
Meaning that these attractions have found themselves to actually be extremely useful to Universal and their guests, despite the fact that they on paper really shouldn't be, and have actually found themselves as actually providing a unique value proposition that no other rides in the resort are really offering. Universal Studios Florida doesn't have any water rides. Epic Universe is only going to open with one water ride, that being Fire Drill, which is a family shooting ride that likely won't get you too tremendously wet. Ultimately,
Fire Drill depends. You can get pretty wet on there. Not as wet as you will get on Bill Drap barges, but it kind of depends. But you come away, we've ridden that like twice, you will come away fairly wet on that ride, unless you just happen to get a fluke and you end up not getting wet, but it'll get you pretty good and soaked.
Even after Epic Universe opens, these two rides will still serve a wholly unique purpose at the Universal Orlando Resort. So much so, to the point that I think Universal has actually come to find them to be irreplaceable. I don't think that
I'm going to go with a disagree on this part.
Universal can imagine Islands of Adventure without these water rides. It just wouldn't operate the same way, and would now have a newfound gap in its lineup that wouldn't be providing these rides that can cool guests off on those super hot summer days in Central Florida.
I mean, in the summer, yes, they are going to draw crowds. The issue with water rides in general is whenever it's not in the middle of the summer, they don't have as much demand, and therefore people go ride other things, causing the wait times to go up in other parts of the park. So the wait times end up being inconsistent. And I think most theme parks would rather have attractions that have like consistent demand and not as much fluctuation in it. I'm just going to disagree. Maybe he's just making a different point, but I don't agree that they're irreplaceable, given you could keep the rides and retheme them to something else if you wanted to keep the water ride attractions. But I think given where they're at and just the overall theme of this land, I'm just going to disagree on that point, at least thus far.
So if you're Universal, you've kind of found yourself stuck between a rock and a hard place now for several years, where you have these properties that are inhabiting this land that are so irrelevant, so outdated, doing absolutely nothing to contribute to your bottom line, but that you also have these super beloved attractions that can be among the most popular in the park on summer days. I mean, it's a hard decision to say that this should go or not. And it's that waffling that has allowed Toon Lagoon to slip through the cracks year after year.
I have a feeling that's kind of what's happened. It's like the waffling of like, it's kind of got a big footprint. What do you put in here? And it's not that they haven't want to get rid of it. It's just, it's slipped through the cracks. You just say, well, okay, let's do this one now. Let's do this one now. And it just kind of ends up staying around. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's been here for 20 years. I kind of feel like that is maybe what has happened with this area.
But I have to say, folks, the irrelevance of the properties in this land has reached a breaking point. 26 years later, It's done. It's over. It cannot continue to last where we have a land with such outdated and irrelevant properties. It cannot last, and Universal, as a result, has undoubtedly added Toon Lagoon to the replacement to-do list. Here's the problem. Do you want to know how long Universal's to-do list is? It's pretty long. And Toon Lagoon, being a land that still has 2 popular rides that serve a purpose, is finding itself very low on that to-do list at the moment. It is not at all a top priority in comparison to what's already on there. Of course, as we already know, number 1 on that to-do list is the replacement for Rip Ride Rockit, which of course is closing in September of this year. After that, look.
They just came out and said, since he did this video, I'm sure August 18th is actually the closing date for Rip Ride Rockit, or the last day for it.
No further than right across the Islands of Adventure Lagoon with Lost Continent, which has already had half of its land eaten up by Harry Potter.
I want to know what's going on with Lost Continent, because they had reopened Poseidon's Fury after they closed it down for a while to redo it. It was open for a very short amount of time, and then it closed back down, and the speculation was Zelda was going to go in here or something else, and we haven't heard a peep about Lost Continent. It is literally just a walkthrough land at this point with food options in there, but most people are just walking through it to get to Hogsmeade. Yeah, that one's interesting for sure.
And also has 2 attractions that have been closed for a number of years now. It is a complete ghost town of a land. That, of course, is next up on the chopping block. Then you have The Simpsons, which has its contract expiring in just a few years in 2028, so that has no choice but to be high on the replacement to-do list. Then, of course, you have
And if those people don't know, the reason that one is for sure going to go away is that contract, I think, expires in 2028 for Simpsons, and now Disney owns the rights to The Simpsons. So not only does I don't think Universal wants to keep The Simpsons, but they're also, like, I don't think there's any way that Disney would renew that contract with them, just given Disney, I'm sure, wants to keep all their properties under the same roof. So that one is going to be very high up on the list, and that big rumor there is Pokemon would go into that land, is the big rumor that's been there for years.
Fear Factor Live, that's been closed for years, and that's sitting right next to the aging and becoming increasingly more irrelevant Men in Black alien attack, so that's a juicy opportunity for replacement right there. And then, of course, you also have the Blue Man Group Theater, which has been sitting largely vacant ever since the Blue Man Group ditched town in 2020.
The only time Universal really uses that building is during Christmas. So we had the Grinch show, which is a great show. But it's the same thing with like Fear Factor. They only use that for Halloween Horror Nights where they have the show that goes on in there. And there's just a lot of space at Universal that is used this way. And they still have so many areas they can improve upon. Like I look at all the ground that Universal's made up against Disney and all the things they can still do in their parks has to be a very encouraging thing for Universal, just knowing all the things, like he said, on their to-do list that are only going to make this park better once they get to them and, you know, set them up even better than, you know, what they were even 10, 20 years ago.
Plus, let's not forget that Universal has already said they're working on the next expansion for Epic Universe already. To get through all this stuff, it's probably going to take about 10 years. By the time 10 years comes around, I guarantee you we're going to have another Epic Universe expansion by then. So yeah, better put that on the list too. And this is all without mentioning the fact that there are backstage buildings that have since been moved over to the Epic Universe plot of land that are now available for in-park expansion for both Studios Florida and Islands of Adventure.
This is something a lot of people don't realize or know about perhaps, but yeah, part of Epic Universe is they moved a lot of these backstage areas not in Epic Universe theme park itself, but the land over there. They have like 850 acres total that they have over there. Epic Universe is like 110 acres of that park as it stands right now. But they've moved a lot of like the Universal creative offices over there, a lot of the backstage areas. So they have freed up backstage areas that they can do something with, given that Universal is very, you know, they don't have the space that like Disney World has. They're like much more, you know, when it comes to land, they don't have as much. So freeing up this space does make you think what they may do with it. If you look at where it's at, like behind Revenge of the Mummy, and then over here in the area near Harry Potter and the Men in Black, like these are obviously areas I'm sure they want to utilize now that they have available. So that makes a very interesting course of the future of, say, the Revenge of the Mummy. If you've got all the space behind it, does Revenge of the Mummy stay around for the next 10, 20 years? I like that ride, but I don't know. That's a very interesting thing to think about when you look at this backstage areas.
Meaning that Toon Lagoon finds itself way at the bottom of the list behind all of that. And here's the interesting thing, folks.
I don't know if I would say Toon Lagoon would be ninth because I don't know how motivated Universal is when it comes to like Fear Factor building over there and like the Blue Man Group building. I don't know how motivated they are to do anything with those areas. They do have big footprints, but I don't know if I would agree that Toon Lagoon comes in ninth on there, just given how much space Toon Lagoon has and how none of these things are relevant in there. And it's not like they use it for, they still use Blue Man Group for Christmas. They still use Fear Factor building there for Halloween Horror Nights. So they do still serve a purpose for special events. So I don't think I would put Toon Lagoon ninth on this list, but I would be curious where Universal, if they have an internal list like this, like where the rankings are on this. That I would be very curious to find out.
We know that this list is fluid. It changes all the time, and the order of priority changes along with it. So after about 10 years, when all this stuff is addressed, you better believe there's now going to be even more stuff in front of Toon Lagoon on this to-do list. I mean, we didn't even mention Fast and Furious Supercharged or Jimmy Fallon, which in 10 years are going to be almost 20 years old. If they're not replaced in the next 10 years, that's already kind of shocking. But if we kick them over to the next 10 years, you better believe they're higher on the priority list than Toon Lagoon. What about Skull Island?
Again, I don't know if I agree with that. Because those are newer I mean, obviously Supercharged is panned. I don't like Jimmy Fallon, but it does, I know some people enjoy that. I don't know if those would take a higher priority over Toon Lagoon. And I can't imagine that land staying the same for the next 10 years. Because that would be like 30 plus years since the park was built and way past the relevant of any of those cartoons in that land. I don't know if I agree with what he's saying there. I get what he's saying, but I feel like Toon Lagoon could have a higher priority than maybe what he's saying here.
Island Reign of Kong and Transformers, those are also going to be approaching 20 years old.
Don't you touch Transformers. Unless you want to put it back to the Generation 1 Transformers, don't touch Transformers. I will protest in front of that building and block it. I will chain myself to Transformers if they ever get rid of Transformers. I say that and they'll probably do it, but don't do it.
Those could easily be seen the chopping block as well. So even though Toon Lagoon continues to get older and more outdated and more irrelevant, the bottom line is that so far up to this point, 26 years in, the quality of those attractions has remained the same. And the popularity of those attractions has either remained the same or has arguably gotten more popular as time has gone on. And it's that fact that could very well keep Toon Lagoon alive pretty much forever.
No. I get what he's saying, but there's no way. I don't think you dedicate that much land mass in Islands of Adventure where Universal Studios is already strapped for land, that this land eats up that much real estate on these old IPs like this when you can do some other things in here. I don't agree with that. I understand his argument. I just don't think that it will be there indefinitely.
Because it's always going to have a one-up on other attractions that find themselves on that to-do list. But just by simply being on that to-do list is always going to put it in a state of danger. It's always going to have a possibility of going away, really, at any point, quite frankly. And though I have extreme doubt that Toon Lagoon is going anywhere within the next decade, I will say that, again, there's a possibility and we should kind of prepare for that. And I think that really, if Toon Lagoon is going to be replaced, there are two outcomes for what could possibly happen. I think one is, well, you don't actually replace Toon Lagoon. I know, doesn't really make much sense, but folks, what I'm saying is that the core value of this land, of course, is the rides. Dudley Do-Right Ripsaw Falls and Popeye Bluto's Bilge Rat Barges. So why don't we just get rid of the rest of the fluff in this land and keep the rides? After all, both Dudley Do-Right and Popeye are on the right side of this land. I guess the north side of this land, if you will. Meaning that the rest of this land is all fluff. It's not necessary. Comic Strip Lane, the Toon Lagoon Theater that's been sitting empty, these carnival games, they can all go. And that's still a sizable amount of land that can be dedicated to a new ride, attraction, or entire land. And I mean, that space from the carnival games to the end of Comic Strip Lane takes up about 3.6 acres, which, mind you, in comparison to, say, the plot of land that Skull Island Reign of Kong takes up, which is only about 2.5 acres, is a substantial plot of land that you really could do a lot with. It could just be one major attraction like they did with King Kong, Or you could make a mini land out of it. This would help Universal to alleviate and mitigate the problem of having these outdated and irrelevant properties in their park by eliminating all those newspaper comic strip characters from their park, as well as, getting rid of some unused space in that Toon Lagoon theater and actually putting it to work for something meaningful.
I don't necessarily disagree with that approach you could take with that, because this land obviously has a lot of fluff to it, but the water rides he's talking about, at their peak in the summer, you're talking about, like, what do you say, 45-minute wait times, and then, like, they can get up to an hour wait time. There are new attractions you could put in here that would command much higher wait times than what those currently have only in the summer. So you're talking about a land where during the summer you have 2 rides that people will ride pretty decently, but the rest of the year people don't really mess with it too much, and there's just a walk-through land. You could build 2 or 3 attractions in this entire plot of land that could be, look what they've done with Epic Universe. You could get some high-tech, like, really great new rides in here that could easily see 60-plus minute waits year-round. That would then help, obviously be a people eater type of land. More people would ride it. The wait times in the other areas of the park could decrease. But as Universal is also expecting more crowds to come in over the years, as Epic Universe is going to continue to grow and Universal is going to continue to eat into market share, you need more things for people to do that they're interested in. And I think Toon Lagoon being the big footprint there, while yes, in the summertime, these attractions are popular, the rest of the year they're not. And you could get something that's much more stable that would command higher wait times than even what these get in the summer, at least in my opinion.
While still getting to keep your 2 powerhouse water rides in place. It's basically like having your cake and eating it too. It's the best of both worlds. But if for whatever reason Universal really wanted to make the most of the 12.6 acres that Toon Lagoon has to offer, then I think the route they would likely take would be, instead of just, completely bulldozing the land to smithereens and starting from scratch, I think that we would likely see some form of a retheme. I think there's a very good chance that we would see Dudley Do-Right and Popeyes be rethemed to other IPs, similar to what they did with Splash Mountain over at Magic Kingdom, right?
It's not a great example in terms of popularity. I think most people would agree Splash Mountain was a better attraction. At least in my eyes, I think Splash Mountain was better than Tiana's. But I also think water rides don't have the demand, I feel like. I don't have any data to point to. I just feel like in general, there's not as much demand for water rides maybe as there used to be. Maybe also the more high-tech attractions, more immersive lands and attractions we've seen. People have come to expect more or different things from attractions like that. So I don't know if I agree with that. You could do that, but I do feel like, in my opinion, I would say bulldoze the whole thing and put something fresh in here and do something very similar to like you've done with Epic Universe and those immersive lands and things like that. I think that's what I would rather see, personally speaking, in here versus just a retheme.
Changing that ride over to Tiana while still maintaining the same ride system and layout. This way, not only do you get to maintain the value that these rides are bringing to the table, being those sort of heat quenchers during those hot summer days, but now you also get to inject more popular IPs into these rides and into this land that can actually generate you significant direct revenue. And if they were to go this route, the prevailing sort of theory or hope is that this would be replaced by SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, I've sort of put a major asterisk on this over the years, sort of saying that SpongeBob would never come to Universal Orlando simply because of his major presence at several different amusement parks, both in the United States and worldwide, at regional amusement parks that are not Universal, right? It is not going to be an exclusive property to Universal, which is such a major asset and value to Universal to say, hey, we're the only place you can find this property in a theme park. However, undoubtedly, SpongeBob has proven to sort of stand the test of time as a popular franchise that spans multiple generations, and it's even being featured in Universal's Kids Resort over in Dallas, Texas. Now, to be fair, that might actually be a signal that it's not coming to Orlando, because that's very much so a regional theme park play, which makes sense for SpongeBob to be there since, he already is featured at regional amusement parks around the US in different regions and different parts of the country. So that kind of makes sense. Putting him in your tourist destination still has those issues, but I do think that because they still clearly have that standing relationship with Paramount, and the fact that the character is still relevant, and we know that, if you were to deliver on a Krusty Krab and a Krabby Patty, that would absolutely bring in the dough. I have no doubt about it that it is certainly possibly on the radar, even though I do still put a tinge of doubt into that pot.
I don't know if SpongeBob, I've never really been into SpongeBob a ton. I don't know if it has the appeal to have a major portion of Islands of Adventure be dedicated to it. But if you were to do it, one of the things I wouldn't want them to touch in Toon Lagoon is Wimpy's, because Wimpy's Burgers is one of the best quick service hamburgers you will find in a theme park. So you could do a Krusty Krab there. Like, you could overlay a lot of this stuff that's already cartoony in here. So I understand why you could look at it. I would just question that much real estate that it would all be dedicated to SpongeBob. I feel like it might be SpongeBob with some other elements maybe, but I think you have other things you could put in here that would have more of a draw than SpongeBob would. And I feel like that's what maybe Universal would aim for, is something with more relevancy than, like, SpongeBob has been around for a while, but I don't see it becoming more popular. I feel like if anything, it would just kind of dwindle a little bit as time goes on, and they may not want to go that route with that IP.
But regardless of what the possibilities are for what could replace it, the bottom line is that Toon Lagoon, throughout its 20 plus years of existence, has proven time and time again that despite how irrelevant the characters are, how outdated the land is, and how unlucrative the whole venture is, it still has proven to be popular with in-park guests and surprises them on a daily basis with how good the quality is for these attractions.
But I think where he's saying it's not lucrative for Universal tells you right there, even though if these attractions, in the summertime are popular, it's not bringing in more money. People aren't coming to Islands of Adventure just for these rides. They're kind of just like, oh, it's hot. Oh, let's go ride this. There are things you could put in here that could garner even more demand that would actually make you more money with, gift shop sales, food sales, like a lot of things that will go into a land here that would make them a lot more money. And I do think you could have better attractions that would appease and be more popular amongst the fan base and actually bring people in specifically for it, and not just a walkthrough like, oh yeah, let's go do this land.
And continues to serve a great value and purpose to Universal, making it potentially a possibly irreplaceable asset in Universal's lineup, despite all of its flaws that have plagued it since the very day that it first entered Islands of Adventure. And that's why I think, in spite of it all, Toon Lagoon is here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I disagree on it being irreplaceable. I don't think it's irreplaceable. I have a hard time seeing this land being around for another 10 to 20 years based off of these cartoons that it's based off of. And like he said, even when this land opened, those cartoons weren't even relevant, and they're just losing relevancy more and more as time goes on. And the size of this land, I think it's just too much real estate. And in a park in Islands of Adventure where you already have Marvel Superhero Island, which I do think is one that will not be touched unless Disney comes to the table to pay for those Marvel rights in the theme park, as Universal's not going to be able to update that land because Disney would have to give the okay for it, and they're just not going to do it. So you already have one land that you're not going to mess with. And for that reason, I don't think you're going to have two lands here that won't be touched in that way. So I'll disrespectfully disagree. I love Attraction Ideas videos, and I think he brings up very solid points as to why this has hung around as long as it has. But I just think it moves up the list. I think it's higher up on the to-do list than he was mentioning before. And I do think it's one, at least my hope is perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years that this one makes way for something else. I think it's prime real estate. I think now IP wise, I don't know really what you could put in here, but Universal has IPs they could put in here. They also are heavily rumored to be perhaps buying Warner Brothers. And if they were to do that, that opens up an entire catalog of potential things that you could do with some of those properties. And Universal, they don't want to necessarily, but they still will do, licensing deals with other properties to bring them into the park. So I think this one is on borrowed time already. And I just don't think the water rides in here I don't think modern theme park audiences look at water rides like they used to necessarily. Like I said, I think people want more of these immersive lands that Universal started doing, these immersive rides, these high-tech rides that people have come accustomed to with, say, Epic Universe. And I think the other issue you have is Epic Universe is brand new park, all these things in there, and you go to Islands of Adventure, and some of these areas are just like, what is this? And I don't think they want that massive difference in the theme parks. I think they're going to look to even that out over time, bringing in more attractions to Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure. So I'll disagree on that. I think this one is going to have something done with it very soon. I say very soon meaning 5 to 10 year period. But it'll be very interesting because Universal has said they have plans for the existing parks and things they're going to bring to those. Rip Ride Rocket is the first announcement they've had, but I think that could be the first of many that they may announce, as I don't think Universal's slowing down one bit. As I said, after Epic Universe opens, they're not going to just sit back on their laurels and just wait for the money to come in on that one. They're going to continue to expand. They're being very aggressive all over the country. They're doing the Halloween Horror Nights event, or not event, but year-round haunted house out in Vegas. They got the kids park they're building in Texas. They just announced the UK park they're building. So they're doing a lot of things, not only in Orlando, but kind of worldwide as well. And I don't think they're going to take their foot off the pedal when it comes to Orlando, because they're just going to continue to build on their momentum. And the more areas of their parks that they can bring up to date with new things and new immersive activities and rides is only going to help them as they continue to grow and eat into market share from Disney. So I don't know where it stands on the to-do list. I think Lost Continent probably is higher, but this is a very similar situation to Lost Continent. It's just a walkthrough area. So like, you're talking about Islands of Adventure, you got Lost Continent, you got Toon Lagoon. You got two areas here that are kind of just walkthroughs, and Toon Lagoon's a bigger footprint than Lost Continent. So if you're looking to do something real immersive, this is a decent amount of land here to do this with. And I just don't, I think the land size itself and how much of this stuff is all irrelevant just leads me to think that this is sooner rather than later going away. So I don't think it's irreplaceable. I'll disagree on that. I get his arguments about why it's still around, but I think you could have better attractions in here that have more higher wait times and stable wait times year round to help with, things for people to do, help with the crowds and things of that nature, and just be an actual draw for the park and not just something that's just there. And I think that could lead to it being on the chopping block very soon. But go check out the video. I'll put a link in the description to Attraction Ideas. Very good channel. Go check him out. Go subscribe. But on this one, I'll just respectfully disagree on that it's going to stay around for a long time. But I agree with him as to why it has stayed around for the length that it has. But I do hope this goes away, because I think it would be a great thing to redo in here and have something brand new coming to the park. And I'm very excited about whatever Universal is going to announce in the next, coming years after Epic opens, and even what they're going to do at Epic. So very exciting time, Universal. But I think this one, if it were me, I'd say it's top 5 on the chopping block if I were to guess. At least for me personally. I don't know where Universal puts it, but that's where I would probably put it in terms of the to-do list of this park. But either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Toon Lagoon is going to be on the chopping block this next decade, or do you think it sticks around even longer? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.